Yeah, we got a couple of minutes. Woo! Boy, you put your gi on. Ah. Let me do one more thing. I'm going to put my Boken in the other room.
Okay.
Well, let's see. We have you and me. And on Monday, Elle's got a couple of doctor's things from early in the morning. So I've got to take her and make sure I help get the instructions and everything for that. So I don't know, it would be your call either to just take the day off or do it yourself. Well, I heard that Bonnie might not make it or something because whatever Aikido instructions is coming in.
Well, I'll go ahead and start the meeting up, and if nobody shows up, then I'll just,
Yeah, well, that's true. Okay, all right. Okay, that sounds about right. Okay.
people show up, we can do some stretches and rolls, and then get on with the rest of the day.
Yeah, that's true. See what the time is, Mike. We got about 5 more minutes. And I was kind of looking for well, okay. Anyway, we'll come up with something. Whew. So tomorrow we have the training in the park. Okay. And let's see. Last class we covered kind of the sense of the Thai sabati, the body changing. And I like the whole thing about you're walking to a wall and you're gonna squeeze through this crack and the crack starts to get narrower. The other thing a crack can start to do, it can start to curve. Okay. One reason Koregaishi is so hard is that what you're really doing is you're going that way, and then you're going that way. And we see it, it's going out and back. Right? And what we need to do a little bit is because the second you go this way to reverse back, you run into the wall. So that's kind of why, in a lot of ways, it's a little bit like trisecting a line in math. You know, people have been trying to do that forever, right? So that part of it tends to be challenging. Okay, let's see. We're a couple of minutes away. You look so proper in your gi. What was your experience like? Again, we talked a little bit about it at the Santa Cruz virtual retreat.
Well, I mean, I always just to thing with Mary Sensei is always for me very, you know, she'll say something that I've heard other people say for years and years and years, and suddenly when she said, it makes a different meaning to me, and it gives me a different, you know, it affects me all the way down to my feet. And that's just something I always really treasure trading with her.
Okay.
And I can never think of his name, Sensei Jan from Sweden.
Yeah.
He also, he has a very, again, he's explaining principles, and he's explaining things that I've been, you know, working on since the beginning, and he just has a different turn of phrase. And so it's like, oh, and I experienced something, you know, a little bit more clearly that I hadn't.
Mm-hmm.
And this has been true every time I study anything. When I went to acting school, 3 or 4 years, I'm in the same class with the same teachers. I go to a different place, different teacher telling me the same things, but now suddenly it makes suddenly makes sense.
Well, just briefly, can you remember anything that Linda Sensei was into? I'm just sort of curious.
She was doing something with the boken, using the boken as sort of a replace, you know, as a bouquet.
Yeah.
So that was, I mean, just as a practice to explore this idea that there's something, and the thing that occurred to me is that any resistance I find in the technique is coming from me. Any struggle in there's nobody else for me to point being so hard to get along with.
Yeah.
And so as I did that, the flow and it just increased, and I just have a feeling of practice where I just any resistance must have a basis in something from me. So I'll just let that resistance go within me, and we'll see where that takes us.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. So was she equating the boken to like a kemi or what?
Let's see. So there's frequent with a lot of these things. Someone will show a practice, and I have a hard time. You know, I'll get it in the class, and then when I try to recreate it, I'm like not clear on it. But the main practice that I did with her that I actually retain is this thought of treat the boken as a yokomen. So yokomen, and then come back with a yokomen. So rather than trying to stop it, and then I let the flow of the sword vice lead me through into, you know, something like an ikkyo or another movement.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of it's just exploring how do you move so that you're not stopping it, blocking it, just letting it flow through, just exploring the movements that come out of instead of it's like, okay, so even just this idea, you know, my hands would get confused because I'd keep trying to do things that I had done before that didn't necessarily always fit.
Mm-hmm.
I always tried to turn it into this, even when I was doing it on the same, right hand lead, because I think partly because that's how I've done it forever.
Okay.
The other thing that was interesting about Jan was he was quite naturally doing Boken practice on both sides.
Yeah.
And that just seemed to be the way he does the practices. And I'm following along, and I was that I'm so expecting to always do it right hand,
Mm-hmm.
left hand, that when I change, it doesn't feel comfortable. And so I'm off balance without even thinking of, realizing it.
Mm. Well,
So,
yeah, go on. Huh.
I've always sort of accepted without too much questioning the sort of, well, in Japan, you always hold your sword this way. And that's just the way, that's just the we practice. That's just our, legacy. That's just how it is. And he made it look so easy and fluid because I think he hasn't let that limit what he has been training, how he's been training himself. I don't know what the side effects of that are, other than the fact that he was able to go this side and this side, and they both looked very fluid and free, and it was, expressive and looked, as good as anything I've ever seen.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's see. I think we are about at that time right now. So, and just checking in. We do have an audience. Hello. Okay. Let's see. Just a couple of things David was talking about. Could you reverse the screen so I can keep myself centered?
I have absolutely no control over anything.
Oh, okay. Let's see. What do we do here?
I'm just an auditory participant today. I don't have any.
Oh, here it is. That works. That works. I did something, and I see everybody else on the bottom of the screen. Yeah, David made an interesting point, because one of the instructors at the Santa Cruz virtual retreat was doing Boken with a reverse grip, and there's a certain area where you're kind of doing this is the way it's held. In fact, in Japanese, it's culture, right? You don't have there's a southpaw. Somebody does it from the left side. You've got a boxer, all of a sudden boxer. You're facing somebody who's left-sided knee as opposed to right, or right-sided knee, because the strong hands are left. But the Japanese culture is like no, you hold the sword. It's really with this grip here. Okay, you don't practice this way. Although apparently, according to what Hikizuchi Sensei said, Sensei would practice against. Oops. Let me see. Spam. I get a warning on my phone now. It says spam. Okay, sorry. But Sensei would actually work that way, because mechanics are a little different. But that's very specialized. It's like all of a sudden, you're fight for your life. If somebody faces you with a left-handed grip, on some level. I mean, that's just specialization. Sensei just probably wanted to just explore that or master that, because that's who's a master, or the master masters things. So it's an interesting thing, because Aikido on some level, it's about exploration. Okay. And then there's also what you call specialization. Sada Haruo, he was a left-handed hitter. He studied with O-sensei, and he would not bat from the right side. It was just him standing on one leg, and waiting for the pitch. So that was very exact, and he wasn't going to see what it was like to swing from the right-hand side. And if you're a pitcher, there were just maybe a couple of pitchers, and I don't know that anyone's gotten very successful. They throw right-handed, but they can also throw left-handed. And so that part of it is, is interesting. So, as a tool for exploration, and there's a truth, right? There's a truth, the right and the left. So that's kind of, as things evolve, that starts to be more of a question, because, as you kind of do both sides. Now, just in terms of me, my left side cut is better than my right side cut. Why? Because I have a lot of bad habits and history on the right side. And, it was in a couple of circumstances, a couple of people said, your left hand cut's good. Because one time I think I was working with Tojima Sensei. He said, try it from the other side. And he said, yeah, that side's good. I was going right side, and I go, from the left side. He said, yeah, swing more like, which is difficult. You should swing more like you do on the left side from your right side, because my right side had all these habits, right? And the left side, there was, I didn't know what I was doing. So boom. So that was closer to what he wanted, right? Then, every night. There's a lot of unlearning that you do here, and boom. So from the left side, the cut was good. So it's just totally almost up to you, If you see something, like David's work, for example, he was showing some of the stuff that Linda Sensei taught at the virtual retreat in Santa Cruz. What it was, if you took that movement you're doing with the sword and started to kind of do that with the staff, that's what the staff is, okay? That's really what the staff is. The staff is a lot freer, or I would say the spear. The spear is not as free as the staff, because you have a pointed, piercing, cutting edge on one side, and you have a non-piercing cutting edge on the other side. And you don't want to go like this to yourself. So when you're moving this way, you may run into trouble where the point starts to come towards you. So, you have to get the sense where one side is the clear yin and the other side is a very clear yang. So it's not quite as free as the staff, okay? The staff is, two ends. It doesn't really matter. I mean, you might hit yourself with it, but, and, we're not using a real sharp spear point, but, right? So it's one of those things where, it just really almost totally depends on what you're doing. I mean, strong side was his left side as a hitter. Stephen Curry can definitely shoot with his left hand, but he shoots with his right hand. But he can do all these things with his left hand, and I'm sure he can shoot. He practices sometimes for fun on the left side. So it just depends. It's just, if you're kind of in a more exacting situation, you go with your strong side. Okay, and if you're exploring, which is also important, you might switch and do stuff from the left side. Anyway, since let's go. Let's see. I do have some housemates, so There's a lot that sort of goes on around here. I hear a vacuum cleaner. Okay, so we're here. And yeah. So the thesis that David had is, when somebody's coming this way, instead of trying to stop the yokomen, you continue it. I'm just saying that the staff is a lot that way. Somebody's coming with a yokomen, instead of trying to stop it, in some sense, you continue the move. And that's harmony. Two things, instead of going this way, they go this way. And what I'm doing with the other movements is really continuing the movement in one form or another. Here we're going one side, we'll go the other side. Now, if we want to, we can also switch to maybe more the left-handed cut side. And Asa Sensei, for example, would do this with the staff. We can't do that anymore. We would kind of go this way. Whoops. I'm kind of polarized and do it a different way, but here we go this way. We go this way. This way. This way. And this sets up other things. But you see, one of the things here is like I'm doing a cutting motion, right? But really what I'm doing on this end is I'm letting that continue as opposed to, right? Now we do some things like that, which is boom, it's a cutting motion with the boken, boom. But you don't stop the cut, boom. Still alive, boom, all right? So one of the things here is that there's all this motion, boom. There's an instant focus. Boom, 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 boom. And right there, for example, this motion, I'm going to stop to go this way, but I can go like that. Or this motion, I stop to go the other way, but I can go. There's a lot of Aikido we do with the Nuke that has a similar feel to it. Okay? So when the staff is coming at you, it can be like a yokomen. Instead of stopping, you see how we're living with it and continuing the motion. This sort of motion, you do the same thing. This is like a thrust coming at me. Okay, now I'm going to not stop it, but take it in a different direction. Cool. So you can sort of devise your own way of doing that. Okay. So what I'd like to do today is just take the yokomen. Now, instead of stopping it and catching it, instead we're going this way. Now, other grip. We're going to add something to it. You can just simply go that way, or simply go that way. That would be a forward flow. Okay? So there's a lot of things. I don't consciously think about uke nage when I'm doing this. For me, I want to stand in a very calm emptiness, not void, but emptiness. And when I can do that, then there are winds that swirl around. Boom. And the winds, all oops, each other. Boom, 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 boom. But there's no set point, but there's kind of a stillness to the interior. That's what I do. But you can take this, go that way. Take this, go that way. It's a throwing motion where you can take this, go to the other side of it. And what you just did is yokomen uchi. iriminage. Or you can go like this, what you just did is Yoko Menuchi, Koregaishi. So there's a lot of things you can do. Whether you can use, I would not use the boken, I would use more staff. Okay, but yeah, what she's doing sounds like, this is what you sort of do if you want to train, because you don't have an uke unless you have a housemate that you can work with. Okay, because we are in the social distancing isolation period. Ooh. We did a little bit of that when we were going through the changes. Ikkyo, Ikkyo, Sankyo, Nyonkyo. Okay? Anybody with an observation? Anybody get a feel for that? Anybody? Huh. Well?
Not at this time, Sensei.
I'm sorry, what? Cliff, what did you just say?
I said not at this time, Sensei.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, you got to kind of use your imagination a little bit, all right? See, the strength of certain things I'm learning to move is that, all of a sudden, you're in a different situation, but maybe the same knowledge base, if you're flexible, can help you with that. All right. There was a video I saw where a couple of MMA guys got into a street encounter in South America, but it was actually filmed. It was not a simulation. All right, outside a convenience store. And they got wiped out by a couple of guys, that were just basically street guys. And what happened to one of them was the street guy picked up a 2x4. And the MMA guy was really good, in the ring against another trained fighter. But the guy just swung at him. Now, somebody's going to they're not going to come at you this way. They're going to, but the empty spot is right there. So we would just move off the line. Okay, but he froze, got hit. And, as the film was released and it's a certain documentation, he was still in a coma. So too much of this can be a weakness, but conversely, too much of that can be a weakness. But, so if we go like this, and we go like that, we're learning how to handle. And we get transpose that into, that's more of the sword version. Shiho Nage. All right. So using a staff or sword, you need a certain amount of quote unquote imagination. But it can, not totally, but it can replace on some level a training partner. David made a really good statement, which is like right here, the resistance is just in my own system. I can't do it, or what do I do? The only resistance I have in my own system is when what should I do next? Did I do a good one? That's resistance. That's I thoughts that create programming and trigger negative programming in your own system. And as we So, so hopefully you've been moving around. Anybody with a question or observation?
Sensei, I just have one, just when we're doing it, I'm still working on, for example, the Ikkyo, I'm still working on the thrust feeling as I'm doing it to get that feeling of fullness. So for me, I'm still working on that more basic.
See, Bonnie made a good point right there. See, I'm just sort of drifting out here. You know, like boom, you have some level of a basic thrust. There's some level of a basic cut. Okay? This stuff isn't going to do you much good out here. But boom, that motion, boom, boom. See, David's point, the only resistance here is in my own system. And that can be mental distraction, or it can be physical tension. And it can be a mind body that's disorganized. Boom, 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 boom. But even right there, see, you start to pick up a beat. Boom. Off of that beat, then there are changes possible. Boom, 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 boom. Okay? Yeah. See, the sense of it is, you know, how much structure do you need? The answer is enough. Enough to function at whatever level that you are. It's supposed to function at in that moment. Okay? For O, for example, to spend an equal amount of time on his right-handed stance would take away from his honing his left side. Boom. Okay? And so Aikido is a little different. See, Sensei designed this because it wasn't about competition. It was kind of about development. So we do a right and a left. Okay? Your right and your left are not identical, but they're equal. One's the strong side, the other's an undeveloped side. And you need both. And as I said, my left cut is actually better than my right cut. And my right cut's gotten better because it's gotten more like my left. Boom. So why didn't I just stop and say, I'm just going to swing my left side now? Because Toshima Sensei said that was a good cut. Because everything that was impeding my right side would kind of get into my left side. So it was up to me to heal and still heal the right side. Okay. Yokomen. See, this is a change. Right? So we oftentimes do a rear thrust, but that's a thrust coming at me. Can I take it up this way? Yeah. Right? So we could work the thrust form. Off the line. And we were kind of doing, for example, the Kotegaishi. Kotegaeshi is the hardest change because, see, the change is from going this way without a set to going the other way. Boom, 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 boom. Okay. So you can begin. I don't know what it's like. Let me explain changes in another form. I'll be back in just a second. Okay. Now, this. So I haven't warmed up today, so, you know. Okay, so we got. Just those notes. There's about 4 or 5 different changes there within the same, let's just say the same blockage of time. The time is like 1, 2, 3, 4. They all go to the same place. But how much variation is there going from here to there? There's a lot of freedom there. Not so much in classical music, but in, let's just say, jazz. Okay? Now, if you don't have the 1, 2, 3, 4, you're going to drift. Okay? So, a lot of, for example, working on gesture thrust, boom, 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 is establishing the 1, 2, 3, 4 in your system. Okay? Now, within that, there's that motion, or there's that motion, or there's that motion, or there's a double motion. So it's very similar. Movement and sound, music and martial arts are probably very, very close. Okay? When I started playing the trumpet, okay? Again, I played in high school, I hadn't played for 40 years, which means you're basically starting again. And okay. And then I would play that stretch the same every time. But I noticed, let's say if I listen to Chet Baker, every time he played that, he played it different. The same notes, it's the same measure of time, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, but he never played it the same twice. Well, that's when I listened to him. And so that's what I started to do when I played. I mean, it's a point where not everybody plays that way. And you can't do that in a classical piece. But when Sensei talked about what he said, Takemusu, you know, boom, your basics are like your 1, 2, 3, 4. If this screwed up, you don't have a sense of it. Now, within that 1, 2, 3, 4, there's a certain amount of freedom, isn't there, after a bit? Now, strictly speaking, the 1, 2, 3, 4 is there. You don't really do too much with the sword 1, 2, 3, 4 on this side. Although I said my left side cuts better. Okay. But within that, within that motion, that's the same 1, 2, 3, 4, which is kind of more like the rhythm of the movement. And then your notes, your sounds, have a lot of flexibility within that 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's, about the only way I can explain it. So you put time into your 1, 2, 3, 4. Boom. Boom. And you also put time into what you can do within that 1, 2, 3, 4. Boom. Okay. Okay. So, anybody with a question or observation? I don't know if the music throws you off, right? But it's pretty much the same thing. That doesn't mean, you should all of a sudden quit Aikido and do music, although Tio Sensei did things like write poetry. He didn't quit martial arts, but he started to, poetry, calligraphy, right? He was expressing himself in another medium using a base he had in martial arts. Okay? So anybody with an observation or question on that?
Oh, that makes sense. I mean, that's totally what we do in Indian classical music. You divide the
Really?
rhythm cycle in different ways, and it works like jazz. That's why
Really? I didn't know that.
That's why I was able to do jazz fusion playing sitar, because you have a very, very rigid time in Indian classical music, and then you just sort of move all over it. But you divide it up precisely. It's never like, it's not like a slurry. It's like just very fine divisions, and you play multiple notes, but you vary the rhythm, but you stay within the rhythm. You don't abandon the rhythm. You are here and there in different, you never play the same thing twice, really, the same way.
Really? I didn't know that. The thing about this, for example, when you have breath, right? 2, that breath with a little help is translated into sound. All right? So all you're really doing is filling up the 1, 2, 3, 4, but you're cutting the 1 up into how many pieces, right? Or sub pieces, right? In other words, right here, that's a beat, but then that beat is cut up into 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, we'd call that Gatpistars, but
Yeah. Yeah. So when things like that go, I mean, see, martial arts, since they said there's no kata or form in Aikido, it doesn't mean there aren't repetitive movements that we do. But 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2, 3, and 4. 1 and 2 and 3, 4. How many different ways can you slice that and still have the 1, 2, 3, 4? If you lose the 1, 2, 3, 4, you go into chaos. But within the 1, 2, 3, 4, there's an almost unlimited creation possible. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? Yes, no? Yeah, okay, yeah. Cliff has a little bit of a musical background, but even, you know, with what we're doing here, you get 1, then you get 2, then you get 1, 2. All I did is fill the 1 and the 2. I cut the first one, I cut the 1 into two sub pieces, you know, 1, 2. Now we go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. I just add another sub piece to 2. All right. And, you know, if I'm starting to kind of lose the 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, it's not the same thing, okay? You see what I mean? It's a tricky area, but what the actual form is very fluid according to the 1, 2, 3, 4. You can't lose the 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can pick a movement, you know, this is like the 1, 2, 3, 4 of what we do with the staff. And this is the 1, 2, 3, 4 of what we do with the sword. Now you can then say, okay, I'm going to 1, 2, 3, 4 from the other side. Okay, that's fine. Or you can 1, 2, 3, 4. We don't normally thrust right very much, but you can. Boom. But off of that, we're boom, 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 boom. Okay, that's like a bunch of 8 notes. 8 notes within one thing. All right. Okay, it's like boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. Then really what you're doing is taking that 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're cutting 1 and 2 and 3, 4 into subbeats. Okay? And if you can't do that, you go back to your 1, 2, 3, 4 basic, 1, 2, 3, 4 basic. And as you get that a little better, then you start to kind of cut it, you know, cut the notes up or the beats up into subbeats. And you have to know the fire, water changes. You have to know the figure 8. You have to know your basic boom, boom. Now, what happens with a cut, when you rotate, becomes a sweeping motion. A thrust, when you rotate, becomes a sweep. But it's still a cut or a thrust. And then, you know, the movements come out of that. And you're limited only, see, I'm wearing this shirt today for a reason, okay? It's an Albert Einstein shirt. It was bought for me by Lou Birmingham sensei. I went to Kauai and I got one of these, but I brought it home and gave it to Frank Sylvie. And so another trip, Lou went with me and we go into a, you know, souvenir section or, you know, just, and there's a bunch of t-shirts and he buys it, he gives it to me, you know. It says imagination is more important than knowledge. Okay. Now, the imagination has to have a base, a 1, 2, 3, 4. But, right, there was a trumpet player who made lots of money, a guy named Herb Alpert. And in the 70s especially, you know, he did the Tijuana Brass. Da 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 da. And he got enough money to start a record company, built a couple of empires and sold them. So he's very well, and he plays well. But at some point he goes up to Chet Baker and says, well, Chet, can you teach me to improvise? And Baker, from the accounts, was very, very diplomatic. And he says, well, Herb, I can't teach you to improvise. Improvisation is totally governed by imagination. And he also added a caveat, or lack thereof. But imagination is just something that as you use it, you develop it. For example, you go 1, and 2. Okay, that's a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 1, 2, 3 on this side. But then you can play around and go 1 and. You can cut, that's just 1 and. If you don't have the 1, 2, 3, 4, you're going to be off that way. But try it. This is 1, 2. Then you go 1 and. See, imagination is not mental. I asked that to Robert Frazier once. I said, is imagination mental? And he looked at me and said, hell no. No, it's not. Imagination is something that you can say requires some level of mind-body integration. But literally, my sense, imagination comes from your soul. And everybody has one, but we're all too caught up in the conventions of I. So, we want to liberate ourselves from the tangled up version of I, which is very predictable. Go deeper. And that's where the movements and sub-movements and rhythms and sub-rhythms come from. Play around. Just move a little bit. See what you can do. Imagination is more important than knowledge. If you're too chaotic, go back, choose a movement, work on your 1, 2, 3, 4. It can be a cut. It can be a thrust. It can be a turn. Okay? But if all you do is 1, 2, 3, 4 within the conventions of 1, 2, 3, 4, imagination and movement are very close. And movement with imagination in it is powerful. Explore. Explore. A lot of people, for example, would associate Bruce Lee with power. But he was really working towards what he called liberation. If you fixated on anything, power, intelligence, beauty, it's a fixation. And that may get you somewhere, and then you'll run into a wall called self. So as you get deeper and truer into self, there is an increasing sense of liberation. Your 1, 2, 3, 4 becomes very, very more, I should say, consistent. But within that 1, 2, 3, 4, your ability to slice those beats up becomes much freer. So you don't lose the 1, 2, 3, 4, but your ability to cut the 1 into 1 and 1 at end and 1 and 1 end. And there's probably, as you keep going, you can go into 16th notes and 32nd notes and whatever it is. Okay? So, you know, that feeling right there, that's all, how shall I put it? That is all imagination. And when there's imagination in your movement, now you need the basics, but the basics are simply the 1, 2, 3, 4. One time, I didn't know what I was doing, so I called a man named Art Frank, who was a drummer. He played with Chet Baker. So I said, Art, I don't really know what I'm doing right now. So could you listen to what I do? So I played him a couple of notes over the phone. And Art's a drummer. And he said, yeah, you have a really good natural sense of time. 1, 2, 3, 4. And he said, yeah, you're able to kind of move very freely within that. And he said, keep going. Okay? Now, one of the things that is tricky, for example, I don't have 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm just kind of meandering somewhere in this. It's all out there. I memorize a routine. 1, 2, 3, 4 There's something inside you. Boom, 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 boom. See, that's right here. There are little pauses and rests within that motion. Boom, 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 boom. Boom. Okay? Okay? And what I'm going to say next may resonate with you, or it can confuse you, or in a more drastic way, it can really turn you off. Okay, if you're ready for it. I discovered this guy on YouTube as a trumpeter. His name is Andrea, even though he's a guy, it's Andrea Giuffredi, Giuffredi. He's a trumpet player. And I listened to him to play this Latin piece, La Virgen de la Macarena. And, you know, he is like, he just is beautiful. Generally, you know, it's like, he Rafael Mendez to Rafael Mendez. Then I heard him play a couple of other pieces, and he out Doc Severinson. And, you know, he's just really, really very good. And then, you know, I watched a couple of things where he teaches online classes in trumpet. And he's got a whole bunch of trumpeters going, you know, it says, play along with me. And they're playing with him. And you know, I watched him a couple of times. I actually enjoy listening to him on YouTube, okay? But then I thought about Chet Baker. And you know what the difference is between Giuffredi and Baker? Baker is broken. All great artists are broken. And there's somebody who has all the technique and all the great sound and can hit the triple high notes and can double and triple time like a machine gun and do that flawlessly. And Giuffredi is not broken. Baker is broken. Miles Davis was broken. Charlie Parker was broken. And that's where the art comes in. I have no doubt that in his own way, Ueshiba O-sensei was broken. He had a wound. He saw his father when he was a young, helpless kid get beaten up by local hoodlums. His father was a political figure and they were going to threaten him, make him do what they wanted. And I'm sure there were other wounds he had. He was small. He was born too prematurely. He was small. Okay. Now in his prime, he was about 180 pounds and 5'1", which means he was about 5 foot by 5 foot. So obviously he compensated for that wound. But there's a certain area where I don't think you get past a certain area being the #1 top gun. You're you because of you. You're broken. And you don't let that stop you. And so that may inspire you, it may scare you, and it may kind of really turn you off. But when I was listening to Giuffredi, I said, this guy is perfect. Perfect sound, perfect range, perfect articulation. I just watched a couple of his classes. He's a perfect teacher for teaching people to be perfect. And I was thinking, what's the difference between him and Chet? Well, Chet's broken. I'd much rather listen to Baker than Giuffredi. All I do when I listen to Giuffredi is criticize myself because I can't do that stuff. And I'll listen to Baker, I get inspired to find my own way. Okay? So anyway, anybody with a question or observation on that last one? See, there's hope for you. Well, you know, I am definitely broken. Okay. I am definitely broken, right? So, you know, anybody?
I had some musical observations earlier, and
Okay.
I can also speak to what you just said.
Yeah.
I'll start with speaking to what you just said, because it's my simplest thing to say, which is don't worry about it, because everyone after a certain age is broken in some way.
That's true. That is very true.
That takes care of itself. It's not a
That's
problem.
right.
The world is what the world is. So the other thing is about musical observations. Two things. One, when you're doing got bistars, bistar is a variation. The got is the main melody of a composition. When you're doing got bistars and other variations, you start slower and you get faster. In other words, if your rhythm cycle is, say, a 7-beat rhythm cycle, you might have 14 notes initially, and then later on you're having like 28 subdivisions, right? So I noticed myself doing that in any session where I'm practicing, like today with the staff or the sword or something, I will be slower at the beginning in the number of moves per time unit. And then naturally I will increase and kind of like you're on a 10-speed bike and you're switching gears, I will increase the number of moves per time unit automatically without even thinking about it, in response to reaching a certain level of comfort with the movements that I'm doing. And that is like music. The other thing is that unlike the Indian classical music that I studied, martial arts, the rhythm isn't quite as rigid. It's more like the rhythm in gagaku, which is Japanese imperial court music, which I also studied. The main musician in gagaku is the taiko player, and that musician sets the rhythm, and it's supposed to be breath rhythm. So that the length of one beat is based on how that senior musician feels about the length of one beat in that breath. So it can change during the course of the composition being performed, and it can also change from performance to performance depending on circumstances.
Okay. Yeah, no, the thing you said about breath is interesting. Because I know that what's interesting to me about, right, the last couple of days, you're in isolation, so I put Baker on. I used to do that all the time. I couldn't even make a sound when I picked it up, but when I put a recording of his on, I could not only make a sound, but I could improvise with him. And so I've been doing that the last couple of days, because she's got to do different stuff. And so what I kind of noticed is that when I'm kind of in his energy field, the interior breath work here in me changes. And when that interior breath work changes, the actual ability to slice and dice and change positions and create. So when I'm playing music, I don't think about notes. I really think almost like I'm creating kind of a scale or a kind of like a mountain range. Okay, and that is a constant sequence, but there's sharper, quicker ones, and they're longer, broader, and there's deeper valleys. And boom, can go that sort of motion. Or conversely, I really think I'm Stephen Curry breaking down somebody else's dribble, because he does the same thing. To go that way, no, it's going that way. Okay, he's going to cross back over the function. So when I watch him, he is very much like Baker. Steph's wounded. He's only 6'3". He's deemed not athletic. He's wounded. Everybody wants LeBron James, and he's Stephen Curry. But guess what? There's a greatness through developing your wound. Baker got a tooth knocked out, so he couldn't, from young times, be an acrobatic trumpet player, because that's very, very tempting. Okay? Sometimes I'll put on Freddie Hubbard or something. I hit notes that I can't hit. just listening to them, you know, double cheek. How did I do that? And then I try it without listening to Freddie Hubbard, and I can't. And I don't really want to get too caught up in playing too high and too fast, because, you know, that gets me out of me, right? I mean, it's fun to do. If I could dunk a basketball, I'd probably go out there and try to dunk it, you know, but I can't. But, you know, so everybody that is Einstein didn't get accepted after the university. He was a patent clerk. That was a wound. He found going to class very, very dull, so he didn't. He barely graduated. He wound up okay. But that was a wound, wasn't it? Okay? So everybody's broken. And if you don't get it, you try to overachieve. All right? I mean, with this book that his niece wrote about the current president, he's broken, but what did he do to fill that void? Success. But right in here, he's broken. And so the country's broken right now. We don't want to go much more into that, okay? So anyway, anybody else with an observation or question? So what I'll leave you with a little bit, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4. You know, if you just go through what we call the 30 movements, that's kind of pretty good grounding in 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, let's just a step back with your right foot, 26, just a turn, 27, thumb space away, 28, take the handle sweep, turn cut, 29, thumb space away, thumb space, 30, step back. From about movement 5 through 30, each of those is a 1, 2, 3, 4. And they have the changes. Ikkyo, Nikkyo, Sankyo, Yonkyo, Gokyo. Figure 8, fire water, thumb up from the bottom, thumb down from the top, figure 8. Thumb up from the bottom, thumb down from the top. You know, just, and you can also just go, like Bonnie was talking about, 1, 2, 3, 4, just do an individual movement. And then you work on, you know, for example, it's just like that's 1 and 2. Can you make it 1 and 2? Or 1 and 2, 1 and 2. Then you add boom, 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 boom. A lot of the Aikido comes in. You got that movement this way and that way, 1, 2, but you make it 1 and 1 and 1 and. Then you understand Stephen Curry's crossover, 1 and you can 1 and. Somebody surprises you 1 and you have a recovery. Or if you're okay, you're a little off 1 and you're right back in the flow of your fall. So those are things that you can research during this time, you know, which is very challenging. We're hitting a whole new phase. You know, if I find myself personally getting kind of depressed going on. what's going on? Conversely, I don't want the economy to tank and people to die just to get a president out of office. But I find myself doing that, which is very depressing. So what do? Well, what I've been doing lately in my therapy, boom, cut, boom, cut, boom, boom. Establish the 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, boom, boom. For how long? I cut until I don't. And then when I stop cutting, I sit. What I'm noticing more than anything else is through that. See, the cut itself, I'm out there, it's not a 1, 2, 3, 4. When you get the 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, boom, boom. The cut becomes a vibration. And when you get that area, yes, you are developing the grip, but what you're really doing, then you start to sit. You're kind of sitting in an energy field with that vibration supporting it. You settle a little deeper into that. I get a kind of a calm pool. The Do-sensei likes the pool. Okay. You can also get a cave, a lot of things you can do, but you're kind of settling deeper. So, I do that, and what it is a little bit, I get too anxious. I pick this up and I swing. All right. There's a lot of stuff I can't do, but I can do that, especially in this social isolation. So everybody here, it's not just a physical body. They're also an energy body. And one of the energy bodies, there are probably several, is vibrational. And so the movement off of that. And what you're doing a little bit, establishing that, boom, that's baseline 1, 2, 3, 4. You don't go 1, 2, 3, 4, but boom, the ability to get to that place there is a 1, 2, 3, 4. Then, boom, boom, then you can start to slice and dice. Elevate, descend, boom, 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 boom. Then it's very free once you establish that 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So those are just things that you can do. The 1, 2, 3, 4 is important, but if all you do is a 1, 2, 3, 4, then what happens is you get rigid. So, the movements of the staff, or what Linda Sensei was doing about the boken, using the boken as an uke, all right, is actually important because, again, we got it from one of the masters of the universe, Albert. He says imagination is more important than knowledge. The 1, 2, 3, 4 of the cut gives you a type of ground. So you're able to, for the imagination to express itself in a type of, I won't call it reality. It's a deeper reality than what's going on in the world, okay? But sometimes if you're feeling kind of really, who am I? Go down to the 1, 2, 3, 4 of the cut. The Do-sensei insisted that one of O-sensei's mantras. He would swing the sword and who am I? That was to define as 1, 2, 3 for the answer was in the 1, 2, 3, 4, but he kept going. Who am I? Who am I? Deeper 1, 2, 3, 4. Finer 1, 2, 3, 4. More original 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's something we can begin to do. Okay, now I'm going to shift into the other room. And those of you who would like to stay a little bit more, we'll go into a little bit of some of what O-sensei said. Okay, so I'm going to shift venue. Go this way. Yeah, this will work. Okay. And we will use the scientific method and just open up and see what's there. This is a very interesting thing because he goes into what he calls Nen, N-E-N, which is a romanization of the Japanese word Nen. And Nen is oftentimes translated as feeling. But I don't think it's like I feel. Okay? And for example, you understand something. You get caught up in your understanding. But the Nen is more like you understand it, but you understand it by having the proper sense of it. And you have your 1, 2, 3, 4, your basic. In Aikido, that can be anything from center to ground. Nado Sensei likes the up-down alignment, breath, vibration. If you establish any of those, you're establishing a 1, 2, 3, 4. And then there's an avenue of expression. You pick up a sword, you're a swordsman or swordswoman. You pick up a staff spear, you're that. With that, you pick up a musical instrument, you are. My sensei was a martial arts master. He was also a poet, a calligrapher, a farmer, a husband, a father, a parent. He was many things. But he's sort of known for the archetype of the all-knowing, all-powerful sage, okay, which is what we give him. I didn't know him personally, so we're studying his words, though. So, I'm 26. Yeah. So it goes back. Keep your Nen, maybe the sense of self. Maybe what Sensei was working towards when he was saying, who am I, as he swung the sword. Free flowing. This is the Nen we must polish. The Nen we must activate in mind and body. So it's possible that the word Nen is a more neutral word for something called a soul. You say soul, and all of a sudden you're going into a very, very advanced, big, maybe theoretical realm. So it uses the word Nen. The 1, 2, 3, 4. We're establishing a baseline groundwork for self. And then you have the freedom to elevate, descend, expand, cut into sub-pieces. You are a creator within this discipline or that discipline. Music or martial arts or sports or economics or laboratory work or whatever. And that's what I think Sensei wanted us to be. Okay, he was a model for certain things. So, whether you're going to swing the sword reverse style, that's totally up to you. See, from that point of view, you are just following the free-flowing version of Nen. And the other way of looking at it is that do you have the 1, 2, 3, 4, the baseline of things? So you go both ways. If you get too rigid, you don't have what he's saying. It's very free. But he had a tremendous foundation, or 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? I mean, anybody can go out there and just sort of play lots of notes fast and high. But great musicians you know, especially jazz, is that you understand the 1, 2, 3, 4. And Bruce Lee, you know, took classical martial arts and he kind of did a number on them. Free, fluid, unpredictable. He was kind of sort of in a very similar area. In fact, you know, according to our Frank, Chet's good friend, they used to watch Bruce Lee movies because Chet loved Bruce Lee. And apparently he loved the Japanese samurai dramas too. And so there was an area where, you know, the musician may see a kindred spirit out there in another discipline. Okay? Your body movements, okay, let's see. The universe is in continual growth, a growth that never stops. That is a spirit we must maintain and know as our source of being. If you do not realize these truths, you cannot practice Aikido. And again, you know, he's kind of putting things out from his viewpoint. Most of us, including me, we fall way short of that. But, you know, that's what champions do. That's what champions do. Steve Kerr, the Warrior coach, you know, Kevin Durant was with us for 3 blessed years. And the way he put it was, what he really used to like about practice is watching Durant after practice really hone in on his stuff. And he says, you know who's like that too? Steph. They do the majority of their work after practice. Practice is just to get in tune with your teammates. And then it's their time to hone in, get their 1, 2, 3, 4, so their nen is free flowing. So you work both things. And that's a very important one. If you're going to work your Aikido in the laboratory, you keep refining your 1, 2, 3, 4 of who you are. And if you get a little lost here, you go back to the 1, 2, 3, 4. But if all you do is hold on to the 1, 2, 3, 4, you become kind of too rigid. You play things a little too safe. Okay, or you get sloppy. So it's really as you continue, as you basically continue on both levels. The secret of Budo martial arts is to link your nen to universal ki, to transcend the realm of life and death, and to stand at the center of the universe. Then genuine techniques will appear, the techniques of love. That is Take Musu Aiki. Tie yourself to that principle and it will resound through your being. It is unlimited transformation. Right from the start, make this philosophy the base of your techniques. In other words, most people start Aikido and they begin to study or training in the techniques, but he's saying, start bigger. Start bigger. Or we all get caught up in the details of the training and everything. But remember to return to bigger, more original. Okay? And then one last thing here, because I was looking for this. Of course, I bump into it again. The universe is one huge reverberation, And we should be in continual communication with that power source. That allows us to perform countless techniques. This is a marvelous functioning of Ki. Your body and the universe are striking the same chord. When we train in Aikido, we should similarly ride the waves of sound and generate light, heat, and power. Nen never operates contrary to the universe. It is derived from Ki, which is very flexible. Never allow your Nen to separate from the universe. Now, he's talking a little bit about what I think is very important. In another time, in another section in there, he says that reverberation is kototomo. Something. A breath. It started with a breath. Big bang. Started with a sound. The beginning was the word, and the word was. Breath, sound. The whole thing was movement or pulse. See, we tend to think Big Bang. But before the Big Bang, there was something. And so, you know, in terms of our Aikido movements, that my research is that original reverberation. That's what we're really working with. Boom. And we practice the cut. Or boom, the thrust. Boom. Now I'm doing the thrust, I did exercise, I learned to do it better with boom. Boom. And sort of put our consciousness to a deep enough place that starts to kind of resonate within us. Okay? So the weapons work for me, and then what happens is, I said, your Nen finds its 1, 2, 3 foundation, and then it's very free-flowing. Reverberation, echo, original movement. Therefore, an original sense of self, soul, spirit, whatever, boom. And that's all the movements or subdivisions of that original. So when we're kind of doing something, says, how come we just do that one movement? Well, if you get that one movement, Wei Tochima Sensei put it, he said, don't learn 10,000 things. He told me, learn the one thing, gives us birth to 10,000. So that. And as we get that, that's a constant work, then all of a sudden, you know, the sense of things is very free. Whether you're holding a basketball or you're holding a musical instrument or whatever, okay? It's ongoing work, so it's what he calls me sogi, because I tends to kind of take it and does this eye thing with it, so you got to keep going deeper. Sadaharu, you know, just said that, you know, if you're doing music or anything skill requires a certain sort of repetitive study, whether it's this or that or that or that. And so he basically says, you got to do it. That is your thing. That is your 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, it may not be Aikido, your 1, 2, 3, 4 may be something that you're doing in quote unquote real life, but if we approach it as a 1, 2, 3, 4, then what happens is as we get that, there's also a corresponding partner to that, which is the free flow, the freedom we get when we get the 1, 2, 3, 4, whether it's music or dribbling a basketball or cutting or, you know, chasing the spear movements. Each of those movements is off of that original reverberation. So that's the best I can do with it. So we did a piece on that today. It's a lot of talking for me. Anybody with a question or observation on any of this stuff? Anybody? So anyway,
For me,
All I could think of, what?
let's do one at a time. So who spoke first? Then the other person.
Bonnie.
Yeah.
I was just saying, the 1, 2, 3, 4. I like it because I know I need to work on my timing, and I'm thinking of a metronome in my head, like doing some strikes or different things. So it's setting some creative juices in my spirit in motion. So it helped me.
Go over that one more time. So I'm sorry, the last part I got, the first part, I missed the first couple of ways you set your last part up. So I'm kind of, could you go back to the beginning?
The sensei, the concept of the 1, 2, 3, 4, the
Yeah.
timing, the
Yeah.
mai, that's helpful for me because I can see with any of the different motions or practices or misogis I do, I need to work on my timing because I'll have a pattern and then I'll see a squirrel and go off in some direction. So focusing on a set, for now, for me, just the one thing, focusing on a steady pace would right now for me be helpful.
Yeah.
So
No, I mean, if you just, see, the thing is, you know, if you just work on that cut, boom, then that's a big thing, okay? And the other stuff, it has a kind of corresponding support to it. So as you start to get the 1, 2, 3, 4, a man just passed on, you know, a man named Eddie Gale, and he was anointed the title of Jazz Ambassador to San Jose. He's a trumpet player. And you know, when I started to pick the horn up, one of the people that was training was a guy named Dennis, who was a guitar player. And he knew, he used to play with Eddie. And so Eddie, for whatever reason, I was putting some stuff online. So he asked Dennis to connect us, so we did. So we came in and we actually did a CD, Sounds of Peace. And, you know, this is a guy, Eddie. He's written up to date in The Guardian as being a very significant jazz player. You don't hear about him too much these days because jazz is like, you know. But he was a legitimate player. And so he comes in, and all I've been doing is going bop, 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 listening to Chet Baker for maybe less than a year. And then he comes in. Well, he brings, you know, Dennis with him and some sound equipment. He said, do you mind if we tape this? I said, you know. But, you know, what was interesting is he, you know, sometimes when you don't know what you're doing, you're fearless. You are absolutely fearless. So, you know, there's this guy, Eddie, who's a legitimate player. And there's me who played in high school and then didn't play for 40 years and just been listening to Chet Baker and playing, and then I get enough nerve to put some of my stuff online, you know, just for the hell of it. And so he comes in, and it's really Dennis on guitar, rhythm guitar, and it's Eddie, and it's me. And he starts playing, and we were supposed to do it more, I can't remember the term of it. He plays and I play. Well, guess what? There's Eddie Gale, jazz ambassador to San Jose. And there's me, who every day listens to Chet Baker, plays along with Chet Baker. So I don't know what I'm doing. He plays and I just go, and he plays, and I go, and I actually listen to it. I mean, I have a couple of those CDs in storage still, you know, and I'm good. Now, I don't know how good I'd be if you just put me, okay, Jack, play something. But you give me a template, you know, whether it's Chet or it's Eddie. And apparently what Eddie said, it was that he didn't tell me this. I actually had breakfast with him once. And, you know, I go to his place. He was living just on the other side of San Fernando Street, just about a block and a half from San Jose. He was doing some teaching at San Jose State for the music department. And so I go and, you know, I listen to some stuff that he does, and, you know, he says, Jack, you are like me and Miles, a natural player. I like your sound. I like what you do with it. I'm going, huh? You know, I mean, what's funny about it is, you know, Art used to call me and start talking to me in terms that I knew nothing about. And then what happened is Art began to realize I didn't know anything. In other words, whatever it was I was doing that he liked, it was something I was doing and I didn't know I was doing it. Therefore, you know, when he would start to get me thinking about what I was doing, it would screw me up. And so he stopped talking to me about that stuff. Okay? And then he was interesting because apparently he didn't say anything more to me. It's just that, you know, it was really fun hanging out with him for a morning. And, you know, he played me some of his albums. He's a great player. And it's amazing how a lot of times real, true artists get ignored. There was a real top player, creative, had vision, a really good, decent human being as well. And so when I opened, you know, just you know, got on the Guardian app on my phone, and they had Eddie, you know, and the fact that he had passed over. And I just thought that was fitting that it was in the Guardian. And I don't know how much of it would have been posted locally, but he made an international news service. And part of that is, you know, and what he told Dennis, which Dennis relayed to me, is this, you know, when we played together, he just said, you know, I never had that happen before. I never heard that before. And what he told Dennis was, I get my own sound right back at me. Because he would do something like that, and then I would just do whatever it was that was coming through me at that moment. Because I didn't know what I was doing at all. So when Eddie set the table with his 1, 2, 3, 4, I could go off of that. And somebody says, well, Jack, what do you do? I go, well, you know what I mean? But if you give me a pretty good 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm very fluid with it. If you, for example, were to say, okay, who would you be if you never saw it was sensei on video or movies, or you never trained with Master Choi, then I don't know who I'd be. Maybe I'd be a comic book writer. Because that was kind of what was my main motivation until I saw Sensei, you know. So anyway, anybody else with a question or comment? So what I'd like you to do, tomorrow, by the way, we're going to be in the park. So that's 11:30 to 1. It's around the corner from the dojo. Cliff, if you got babysitting, you can still get it online. I will post it. I posted the last one.
I got the kids.
We got a pretty good audience, right? And it's amazing because I had to edit a lot of it out. Because, you know, the actual stuff, sometimes the camera freezes and sometimes the sound stops or freezes. So anyway, we've got a pretty good attendance for it. We'll probably work some of this tomorrow because it's not a bad layout that what you really have. I mean, whether it's music, see anything you do. I mean, you know, if you look at me, for example, you know, what did my parents want me to be? You know, they were interred during the war, you know. I mean, a lot of the problems, you know, that are coming up around, you know, certain like racial issues and everything. Well, guess what? My parents faced that in World War II. You know, they were interred. My father, in spite of that, he enlisted in the Army, the 442 Infantry Unit. So, you know, that was for the record, it was most heavily decorated unit in the U.S. Army was that division of Japanese Americans who had been interred. And that part of it, I lost my train of thought. But anyway, that part of it though, you know, the actual sense of being in the moment, establishing your baseline 1, 2, 3, 4 for your the free beingness of your soul spirit. What would Miles Davis have been without music? What would Chet Baker have been without music? What would Stephen Curry done if he hadn't gotten into basketball? What would O have done if he hadn't found baseball? What would Einstein have done if, for whatever reason, he played the game and was a professor at some university and he had to publish and deal with departmental politics at that level? He may never have won a Nobel Prize. But it's almost like, as I said, your wound is part of your salvation, if you look at it a certain way. I know that it's not something that we want to think about. But if Einstein had been a better student, if Stephen Curry had been a half a foot taller, he would have been probably an all-star, but not an all-time great. And if Chet had teeth, as opposed to having one tooth knocked out when he was 13, and he could play 2 octaves above what he had developed, we don't know. Really, truly great people are broken. It's what they do with it that defines them. Okay, so that means there's hope for all of us. Okay, anyway, I'm going to call it for today. So thank you for tuning in. Okay, I will see some of you hopefully tomorrow in the park. Monday, Elle has to go in for some post-op stuff. And that's going to be like Monday morning in Redwood City. So I'm passing it on to David. Okay. You seem to we have a really sort of good group going here. So David's choice, whether he has an audience or he doesn't, and he just ends it. But I'm urging you to support the class on Monday, and I will be back Wednesday. Okay, so thank you all. And we go end. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Hi, thank you. I hope your appointment goes well on Monday.
Okay, we'll go.